Now let's talk about constructor chaining using the super keyword. Now before that, let's do a quick revision. Point 1. If you write a class and do not write a constructor, Java will give you the default constructor automatically. Alright, so if you write a class called public class empty, for example, and you do not provide a constructor, let me save empty empty.java. You do not provide a constructor, Java automatically inserts a default constructor for you. A default constructor is the one which takes in nothing. Alright, so this will be automatically inserted for you. Let me save this. And that is the reason you are able to create an instance of empty like that. Brackets, empty brackets. That means you're actually calling the default constructor in empty when you create a new instance of empty. Now, on the other hand, if you specifically write a constructor, let's say in this case, empty takes in and this constructor takes in an integer, okay, constructor. All right. Now, in this case, since Java notices that you have written a constructor, although this is not the default or the parameterized constructor, it takes in an integer. Once Java sees something like that, it will not give you a default constructor. Okay, in which case, this code here will fail to compile. Let's try. You'll get a no symbol found kind of error. Okay, they've improved the compilation error message now. It says the constructor empty in class empty cannot be applied to the given types. What is required is a constructor which takes in a number. In other words, when you create an instance of empty, you have to use the constructor which takes in a number. However, what has been found on line 3 here is that you are actually calling the constructor of empty which takes in nothing, and that constructor does not exist. The only way to create an instance of of empty in this case is to pass in an integer. Okay, in this case you can compile, no problem. Okay, because once you have written a constructor, Java will not give you a default constructor. So that is point number 1 here. Point number 2, you should be familiar with using the this keyword, this bracket bracket, to call a constructor in the same class, basically an overloaded constructor. So I've written dump here, and dump has got 3 constructors. This one is the default constructor, it takes in nothing. This one is the constructor which takes in an integer and basically prints out running constructor of dump that takes in an int. This third constructor, alright, takes in an int followed by a string, and it prints out running constructor of dump that takes in an int and string. So these 3 are overloaded methods, or to be more specific, overloaded constructors. Methods of the same name, they have to be the same name as the class anyway, because it's a constructor. Methods of the same name, and they take in different input parameters, overloaded constructors. Now the question is, when I create an instance of dump, only one of them can be called. Alright, if I create an instance of dump like that, 3, apple, alright, only the third constructor will be called. Okay, because you will try to match the 3, apple with one of the available constructors. Now you can use the this keyword to call another constructor in the same class. So for example, I can do this 3, this 0, Okay, and here I can do this x comma nothing. Now what I've done is if this constructor gets invoked, and you can invoke it by creating a new instance of dump this way, correct? If this constructor gets invoked, it jumps to line 7. Basically, line 7 will jump to a constructor in the same class which takes in a number, an integer, which is this one. So from line 7, I jump to line 12. Line 12, I will jump to a constructor which takes in a number followed by a string, which is line 16, this constructor. Okay, and pass in the number, comma, nothing. Alright, you print this statement out. You return to line 13, print this statement out. You return to line 8, print this statement out. Okay, let me save everything. And let's try to compile test. Remember, the main method in test actually creates an instance of dump by calling the constructor at line 6. Okay, the default constructor. Okay, and if you check the sequence of the statements here, the sequence of the output statements here is exactly what I've mentioned just now. Jump to line 7, jump to line 12, jump to line 17, print this out, jump back to line 13, print this out, jump back to line 8, print this out, and then jump back to the main method here. The new dump instance is created. So this is what we call constructor chaining using the this keyword. Alright, constructor chaining is used to save coding. Okay, used to save code reuse. Another name for this kind of constructor chaining is called horizontal constructor chaining, because you have a constructor calling another constructor in the same class. That's why it's called horizontal constructor chaining. Now, the focus of today, this session is vertical constructor chaining. Vertical constructor chaining. We are going to call a constructor in the parent class. Now, first thing first, let's look at point number 1. Let me change the color of the pen to red. Point number 1 states that constructors are not inherited. Now, I was saying that if you extend a class, everything from the parent class, including attributes and methods, will be inherited. Now, that's not entirely accurate, because constructors, which are a special kind of methods, will not be inherited. Let me prove it to you. Fast one. Employee, there is a constructor which takes in nothing, the default constructor. The manager class, which extends employee, I have a constructor which takes in an int. Alright, so let me change the test class. Manager m equals to new manager nothing. Now, if constructors are inherited, I will expect tests to be compilable, because employee's default constructor would have been inherited to manager, and I will be able to create an instance of manager by passing in nothing. That means I'm trying to invoke the default constructor in manager. Alright, when I try to, let me save everything. When I try to compile test this time, I'll get the compilation error. Okay, it says that the constructor of manager needs an int. You can't call the constructor of manager by passing in nothing. Right? This proves that constructors are not inherited. That's point 1. Which means that if you want a constructor in manager which takes in nothing, you have to write it. Yep. Running constructor of manager that takes in nothing. If you do it this way, test will be compilable. No problem. Alright. Now, second point, use super, the super keyword, super bracket bracket, to call a constructor in the immediate parent class. You don't inherit constructors, but you are able to call a constructor in the parent class, the immediate parent class. How do we do that? Okay. Now let's try this. Super bracket bracket calls employee, okay, which takes in nothing. Now you can pass in something in there as long as there is a constructor in the parent class which takes in something. So in this case, let's try to run tests and see what happens. Compile, run. Two statements get printed out. Okay, and what are these two statements? So what happens is, when line 3 executes, it will try to run the constructor of manager which takes in nothing, the default constructor, which is this one. It jumps to line 11, meets a super bracket bracket statement, which basically invokes the constructor in the parent class, which is employee, which takes in nothing. Okay, I'll jump to employee here, and this is the constructor which takes in nothing. You jump to line 6 and print out running default constructor of employee, and that's exactly what's shown here in the command screen. You will return to line 12 of manager, and you print out running constructor of manager that takes in nothing. Alright, and that's exactly what gets printed out here. Alright, and after line 12 of manager, you will jump back to test and carry on. Basically, it returns from the main method. So this is constructor chaining, vertical chaining, using the super bracket bracket keyword. Alright. Of course, you can mix this bracket bracket and super bracket bracket. Okay, but you can't have both. A constructor can only have super something or this something as the first line of the constructor. You can't have both. Now there is another point here which is very interesting. Point 3. If there is no this or super statement in a constructor, Java will do something extra for you again as usual. Java will insert super bracket bracket mayu with nothing between the brackets. We insert super bracket bracket for you automatically as the first statement of your constructor, of all the constructors, without a this statement or a super statement as the first statement in your constructor. Let's prove that. Okay, let's go to manager. Okay, let me get rid of this. It's okay. So the manager class has got only one constructor, and that constructor takes in an integer. Alright. And the employee class, let me change the employee class a bit so that equals to init salary, so that it has a constructor which takes in an int. This is the only constructor. Alright. Employee has a constructor which takes in an int only, no default constructor. Manager has a constructor which takes in an int only, no default constructor. So when I create a new instance of manager, I have to pass in, a number, correct? It's 300. This shall be the bonus. Save everything. Let's try to compile test. No. Let's try to compile manager. You will have difficulty compiling manager in the first place. Now, what is all this about? It says line 5 of manager, there's an error. What is line 5 of manager? This one. The error is the constructor employee in the employee class cannot be applied to the given types. So this is misleading, meaning that if you do not understand this point number 3, if you do not understand point number 3, you'll be scratching your head as to what is this compilation error all about. Now, I was saying just now that if you do not have a super keyword or this keyword, okay, in a constructor, this will be automatically inserted for you as the first statement in the constructor. Now, what this does is going to try to call a constructor in the parent class employee, basically in this case employee, which takes in nothing. And there is no such constructor in employee. And that is the cause of this error. It is expecting you to call the constructor in the parent class which takes in an int, because that is the only constructor available, but it found no arguments. So be careful of that. In this case, I must specifically call the constructor in the parent class which takes in the salary amount, 500. Okay. Compile, and this works. Manager can be compiled because when this constructor is invoked, it will call the constructor in employee which takes in the default or the initial salary. So especially for private attributes in employee, let's assume salary is private. So there's no way unless you use set salary to change the value of salary, but there's no way to access salary directly from manager. Let's assume that you have a constructor in manager which takes in the initial bonus and the initial salary. You want to set the bonus to whatever is taken in, you want to set the salary to what is taken in. And there's no way to change the salary directly. You can't do this here. You can't do salary equals to initial salary because salary is private in employee. A good way to solve the problem is to use super, okay, to call the constructor in employee, okay, and pass in the initial salary. This will match this particular constructor in employee. And what does it do? On line 6, it sets the initial salary, it sets the salary to the init salary value, and then it returns to line 7 of manager and carries on, setting the bonus to init bonus. This is common. Alright, if you save everything, manager can compile and test can run. Oops, what is in test? There's a problem with test because there's no constructor in manager which takes in only one integer. Alright, I have to pass in the bonus and the salary. Save it, compile test, and run test. Okay, so that is constructor chaining vertically using the super bracket keyword.